In this video, I've got some really good bets to share with you for UFC 330. For each of these bets, we're going to be going into a lot of depth, showing you some video footage of both fighters so you can not only understand the reasons why these are good bets from what I'm telling you, but you can see them for yourself with the clips of past fights that we're going to be watching together and I'm going to be talking you through. If you don't know much about me, I'm a professional gambler that specialises in live betting on both the UFC and live betting on football, or depending on what part of the world you're from, you may know it as soccer. As you can see from both our profitability charts, we've got a really long history of making very good profits on both sports. So you can see, dating back to when I first started tracking my results publicly, I've made a profit since 2014, so 12 years now live betting on the UFC, and we make a profit in 72% of months. So if you're watching this video and you want to make money betting on the UFC, and that's the reason why you're watching this, to try and get some insight from these breakdown videos, and you're trying to work out your bets for Saturday night, just know that a shortcut to making money on most UFC events in most months of the year is quite simply joining my community and tailing my live bets for each card. Not only will you make a lot of money from my live betting service on the UFC, you'll love it, you'll earn a lot, and you'll join a really strong community, close-knit bunch of guys, a very mature set of gamblers, and we've been doing this together for years. So come and join the team. Don't stress about watching the breakdown videos, doing your own research, figuring out your own bets. Come and tail professional gambler, because you don't have to be a professional gambler to bet like one. So check out my website, diaryofaprogambler.com. You can Google it. You can check out a link in the description below. And if you don't want to commit to staying up every Saturday night live betting every single UFC event, that's okay, because I also am very profitable live betting on football or soccer. Football, soccer, a little bit different, because we actually bet every single day of the week. Now, I only started betting on football 4 years ago, so our results date back to 2022, which is why our profit chart is a little bit choppier than this nice, steady, consistent uptrend. But that's generally because when I first started live betting on the UFC back in 2014, I'd already been live betting myself for like 3 or 4 years, where I was kind of learning my craft, experimenting, analysing my performance and tweaking my betting strategies to get better and better. So in the first few years that I live bet on the UFC, there was some choppiness, and now obviously you guys benefit from me having learned from all those mistakes, and now you make money 72% of months in a year, pretty much every month. And as you can see from the profit chart, when we do have dips, which is very, very rare, but the winning runs massively outsize the losing runs, to the extent where we've never actually had a downswing in UFC live betting. Our largest ever dip was 15.5 units, which was here, and in the grand scheme of things, that is absolutely nothing in the big picture. In 10 years from now, you look back at this profit chart when the results are up here somewhere, it won't even be a scratch. And in terms of football, obviously, because from day one when I started to bet on football seriously, I tracked everything in public, which is why this profit chart is a lot choppier, because in this period here, I was still kind of learning my craft, tweaking my betting strategies, analysing my results, and learning from my mistakes essentially. So if you look at my profitability chart on football, you can see over the last 4 years we've got an ROI of 2.1%, but I'm getting better and better over time. And you can see we're in the middle of a very nice winning run here, a very, very nice uptrend. So if we switch to our 2026 results, you can see our profitability has doubled over a huge sample size of 1,206 bets. I mean, look at this. Over the last 4 years, we've placed over 5,000 bets, and since January, we've placed 1,206 bets. So this is not a flash in the pan. This is not someone that claims to be profitable after a good year or a good couple of years or a good series of months. This is someone that has put major volume in and has proven over a very long period of time, very large sample size, that they are profitable, and it's impossible to fluke this. So again, if you want to make money betting on sports, which very few people in the world actually do, come try out what I do. I think you'd absolutely love it. and you will definitely learn a lot, and you'll also make some money in the process. Our win rates aren't quite as good on football as they are on UFC. We make a profit in 65% of months on football, but that's still world class, pretty damn good, and still making a profit almost every month of the year. So if you combine the two, you can do really well. And in these uncertain times where everyone's worried about losing their job to AI, the economy's brutal, inflation's running out of control, everyone's worried about, the future is very uncertain. What's really cool about what I do is, for the time being, it's very, very future proof. It doesn't matter if a government goes to war with another country. It doesn't matter if a fucking Strait of Hormuz gets closed. It doesn't matter about AI. It doesn't matter about inflation. It doesn't matter about anything. At the end of the day, there are still sports to bet every day of the week. That's why we have football. And we're totally immune to all the chaos going on in the world, which is why our level of profitability has been extremely consistent on the UFC over the last 12 years. At the end of the day, two people trying to kill each other in a cage fundamentally doesn't change very much from year to year. And with football, like I say, we are starting to find that consistency now. This is our profitability chart from 2026. It doesn't matter what country is bombing what country, what oil crisis there is, what gas crisis, what inflation numbers are, what unemployment numbers are. Every month we show up, we work hard, we research fighting, we research football, and we've got proven betting strategies that produce a profit over a very, very long period of time. So if you are looking for ways to make some extra cash outside of all the chaos and lunacy going on in the world right now, good news is you've come to the right place, because I'm one of the best in the world at this, and I think by the time my career is done, I will be one of the greatest of all time. I probably am the greatest of all time when it comes to live betting on the UFC. Still some work to do on football, but I'm a lot younger on my journey in football. I will probably get there. And you're here now to talk about pre-fight betting, right? And you know what? I am profitable on pre-fight bets, but it's a very, very small part of what I do. You can actually see here that we're profitable in 56% of months on pre-fight bets, so not quite as good. But what's interesting about pre-fight betting is, even though my performance on pre-fight bets are the weakest out of the three things that I do, I am still profitable, and this should be celebrated, because ultimately very, very few people in the world betting on sports are profitable betting on sports, right? So a lot of the people that will criticize me online or in the comment section talk really bold and brash about how much I suck and I don't know what I'm doing, the same sort of stuff you get from people online on any topic or for anyone, right? Anyone putting himself out in public is going to get hate online. I'm no different. But these people don't understand that just to earn any kind of profitable at all on sports is very, very difficult. So guys like me should be celebrated and appreciated that I'm out here sharing 20 years of experience with you guys, helping you to become better at gambling. And I've actually proven in cold, hard blood, with all my bets public forever, that I can do this. I've been registered my X account about 15 fucking years ago or something. We've been on YouTube for almost 10 years now. Breaking down pretty much every UFC fight, sharing all these bets, and we're sharing more in this video. So this year so far has been a choppy one in 2026. We're only up about 5 units in 2026 so far, which isn't great. 7 months work, but it's better than losing. And a very, very choppy profit chart is hopefully something we can improve now with the run into the year, starting with this week's event at UFC 330. But I also just want to push home the fact that this is a very, very small part of what I do. I only bet a fraction of money on pre-fight bets that I place on football bets, and you can see where my fucking focus is, right? We've only placed 156 bets on UFC pre-fight bets this year, which is around 10% of the amount of football bets that I've placed this year. So again, I'm a professional gambler that makes a living from betting on sports. But if you want to see what I really do, the power and magic of what I really do, it's football live betting, it's UFC live betting. And trust me, if you experience those two things with me, you will never look back. It'll change the way you look at sports betting. You'll absolutely love it. And so you're probably wondering, well, why does he talk about these fights in so much depth if pre-fight betting's not really much of an interest for him? Well, all the stuff that I talk about in these videos where we break these fights down in a lot of depth, they are our blueprint, our guide, our shining light to making money live betting on the UFC. So where you see this incredible profit chart, if we go back to the home page, where you see this incredible profit chart where we've never had a dip in 12 years, this one here, all of this comes from basically doing your homework, doing your research on fights, right? Which makes sense because ultimately it's like a test. Every Saturday night it's like a test on the UFC, test on these fights, test on these fighters, right? And so you study all week, do your research all week, and then when it comes doing the test on Saturday night, the better you prepare, the more research you do, the better you'll perform. And I work very hard. I spend about 30 hours every week researching UFC fights, and that's how I've been able to produce this very consistent level of performance over such a very long period of time. And that is what you can benefit from when you watch these videos, because even if you're not into live betting, you can be sure that the pre-fight bets that I share in these videos are profitable long term. I've proven it over a very long period of time. And even if they're not massively profitable, the information I share with you in these videos is very accurate because I put the time into everything that I tell you guys. Fact checked, fucking authenticated, everything, right? Paid in full, 30 hours of research. And so when you're making your own bets, if you don't want to come part of what we do over on my Diary of a Pro Gambler community, at least you can benefit from hours and hours and hours of research that has gone into a card, and over an hour of research on every fight, which hopefully stays you out of trouble, increases the probability of you making a bit of extra cash. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I've got UFC Fight Pass fired up so that we can play you some videos, and I'm also going to make sure I've got my betting site up as well, where I can show you over underlines, fight spreads, things of that nature. We've got it up over here. That's cool. So we're going to kick things off by breaking down the fight between Mick de Beck Orelbai and Jeremiah Wells, which is not the most interesting fight. I don't need to tell you that. There's a big age gap between these two. You can see that Orelbai is 11 years younger than Jeremiah Wells, and he's also a massive favourite. And the reason why he's such a big favourite is because both these guys are wrestlers. We know that Wells does have big power, but Orelbai proved in his fight against Mateusz Rebecki, which was an absolute war, that he does have a good chin and he's very durable. So even though Wells has true legit knockout power, Rebecki has also got very big knockout power, and Orelbai was able to eat absolute bombs throughout that fight to the point where he looked like he'd been in a car crash afterwards with how much damage he took. And he proved his toughness and durability in that matchup. Now, with both these being MMA grapplers, ultimately, a lot of this fight is probably going to take place in grappling positions. And there is no doubt that Orelbai is just a significantly better grappler. Not only is he younger with better cardio, but he's also a better technical MMA grappler. Wells relies a lot on his strength and physicality. Doesn't have the best technique. Orelbai does. His technique on the ground is absolutely excellent, and another weakness in Wells' skill set is that he also gives up position a lot on the ground. So you know me by now, I'm one of these guys that says, always let the odds do the work for you, but there's not a lot of work the odds can do for us here, because Orelbai is a massive favourite, which means it's impossible to bet him. There's no value there, and I would not want to bet Jeremiah Wells as a big underdog either, because with his age, the fact that he's second best to Orelbai probably everywhere, actually, I'd even say Orelbai is probably a better striker, but Orelbai is certainly a better grappler, certainly better cardio, tough, durable. I think the only way Wells is going to win this is by flash knockout, or if something crazy happens like Orelbai getting injured or having a bad weight cut and underperforming, which does happen from time to time. But it's an easy fight for Orelbai, and as a result, we must pass. And I don't think there's going to be too much going on with the fight spreads and the over-unders either, if we take a look at those. So, they're not available yet because the video's out early. Well, that is unfortunate. Well, that's another reason to check out my website, because I will likely be adding some fight spread bets for these fights which we don't have odds for yet. In terms of the over-under, I wouldn't touch that. My lean is over 1.5 rounds because both guys are tough and well-rounded. But I do think that if the fight goes to the ground, I'll buy my absolutely drown Jeremiah Wells, because Wells is one of these guys that is strong in offensive grappling positions but quite weak in defensive grappling positions. So I think it's time we moved on to our first bet of the event. The first bet I'm going to be going for, which is going to be Ramiz Brahimaj. And this is another one of those fights where, again, you've just got to let the odds do the work for you. So when we recommended a bet on Bruno Lopez last week and he got knocked out in round 1, there were a bunch of virgins that loved to rush to the comment section after the event to tell me how I'm a clueless fraud and Bruno Lopez was the dumbest bet of all time. And it's funny because when we win bets, which is more often than not, I don't get any comments on the YouTube videos after. It's funny how that works, isn't it? But I guess that's the human race for you, an absolute fucking virus. Or not the human race. The human race isn't a virus. People like that are, who just basically want to kick you in the nuts anytime you know, something doesn't go well. But anyway, we won't digress. That's just the way the world works, right? There are far more people that are a waste of oxygen than producers who try to make the world a better place. But bringing it back to this fight, we always say you've got to let the odds do the work for you, okay? And if I would have come out last week and said Bruno Lopez is a great bet, you know, he's going to absolutely smoke Njokuani on the feet and completely dominate him on the ground, and he's better than Njokuani everywhere, fine, trash me for the Bruno Lopez bet, because that would have been terrible, terrible, terrible advice, terrible analysis. But that's not what I said. I said Bruno Lopez is a terrible striker, Njokuani is a terrible grappler. Lopez, if he gets the fight to the ground, he's going to absolutely dominate, and with him being a slight underdog, at worst this fight is 50-50, right? Njokuani better striker, Lopez better grappler, fight stays standing, Lopez gets killed, fight goes to the ground, Njokuani gets killed. So there's a bit of value on Lopez, that's what we said. And the fight did stay standing. Lopez got KO'd dead, right? Which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But Lopez didn't shoot a takedown until he actually got rocked, and ironically then did shoot a takedown and got Njokuani down easily, because Njokuani's awful on the ground, which is exactly what we fucking said last week. But the point being, we don't have a crystal ball to tell us how these fights are going to play out or the game plan these fighters are going to use. A few weeks ago, Kamaru Usman tried to win a striking match against Dricus du Plessis, didn't shoot a single takedown after watching Chimaev easily get du Plessis down and dominate him for 5 rounds. So we can't go in there. I mean, we're not betting on fucking robots where we've got like a fucking PlayStation controller where we can control what Ramiz Brahimaj or, you know, Bruno Lopez or Kamaru Usman or anyone else on this card is going to do. We can't do that, right? We don't have a crystal ball. All we can do is put our money in strong positions and make the best decisions we can with the information we've got available, right? And you've got to let the odds do the work for you. So when you've got a fight like this between Ramiz Brahimaj and Neil Magny, there are lots of ways Brahimaj can lose this fight. It's a fight, or he's a fighter that is difficult to like and difficult to trust because his fight IQ is very bad. That's why he's got a very, not a particularly good record of 13-6. It's one of those fights where if he actually shows up and performs to his full potential, this should be one of the easiest fights of his career. Not exaggerating, legitimately one of the easiest fights of his career. But Brahimaj's biggest weakness is that he quite often doesn't show up and perform to his full potential. And so this is one of those matchups where the odds are good value. He's worth taking as a bet. But this is one of those fighters that if you bet him, he could come out on Saturday night, not shoot a single takedown, get his face jabbed off by Neil Magny, look absolutely awful, and then no doubt Saturday night there'll be another bunch of virgins in the comments telling me I'm a clueless fraud that has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Unfortunately, I haven't yet found a reseller of crystal balls. If they were available for sale, I would buy one. I'm trying to buy an RTX 5090 at the moment to build a new PC. As you guys know, it's very difficult unless you want to pay very, very large amount of money. I think they're about $7,000 at the moment, which I think I'm going to end up having to do over the next few weeks. But the point being, I can't find a crystal ball to buy anywhere. So I'm really sorry every once in a while when I'll say, hey, bet Bruno Lopez. He usually grapples his ass off. If he grapples in this fight, he'll probably dominate Njokuani, and then he doesn't shoot a takedown, gets knocked out. I'm really sorry I didn't have a crystal ball to predict that. I'm telling you right now, ahead of this weekend, the same thing might happen with Brahimaj. Same thing might happen. He might not grapple, but if he does, he will absolutely dominate Neil Magny. And I think the mistake I made with last week's breakdown, which is possibly why more virgins descended on my comment section to tell me I was a clueless idiot, is because I made the mistake of not actually showing you footage of how bad Njokuani was on the ground. So we're not going to make that mistake again. This week, we're going to show you some footage of Neil Magny so that you can see why this is an easy fight for Brahimaj, probably the easiest fight of his career, if he actually just shows up and fights with a brain, which in MMA doesn't happen all that often. But I guess you've got to expect it because, I mean, being an MMA fighter is not the smartest life choice. So why should we expect MMA fighters to have, high degree of intelligence? We probably shouldn't. We're setting ourselves up for failure by assuming they will fight smart. So before we get into just looking a little bit of footage of Mr. Magny, we're going to go through all the reasons why Brahimaj is a good bet here. So we've hinted at the first, his grappling. So Brahimaj, he's not an amazing grappler, but he is a decent MMA grappler. Good offensive wrestling, good grappling control, decent on the ground. He's also a lot younger than Neil Magny. Over the last few years, Neil Magny has been on a really, really steep decline. The receding hairline, sorry boys, those of you with a receding hairline out there watching this video, is a bit of a red flag. When you've got a receding hairline, it is a sign that your natural testosterone levels are dipping, and that usually coincides with a decline in a fighter's physical ability, his athleticism. And we've seen that from Neil Magny over the last 5 years. He's now 39 years old, which means he should be declining a lot from fight to fight. And I can talk about this because I'm 42 years old. I'm old as well. No doubt my testosterone's going, as well as a receding hairline. You know what else is a sign of a lower level of testosterone production? Grey in the beard, boys. You can see plenty of grey there. So if you're watching this and you do have a receding hairline, boys, my hair might be looking good, but the fucking grey hairs are a sign that, I got the same problem as Mr. Magny, so I can talk like this. Whereas look at Brahimaj, beautiful beard, beautiful hair. He's still in his prime at 33 years old. And we know that the younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there is a 6-year age gap in a fight. However, the statistic for how often 33-year-olds beat 39-year-olds will be far higher, because when you've got an age gap of 6 years, that could be a 30-year-old fighting a 24-year-old, a 35-year-old fighting a 29-year-old. That stat is an average. We know what the stat means is the older you get, the worse you get. And when older guys face younger guys, they're usually at a disadvantage. So this is kind of the sweet spot for where that stat is really powerful and really meaningful, because Brahimaj in his athletic prime, whereas Neil Magny will be declining a lot from fight to fight. And so when you look at Brahimaj's odds of 1.74, which is minus 135, that gives him an implied probability of 55%. And I think it's more than reasonable with his advantages on the ground, and the fact he's a lot younger, and the fact we know for sure Magny is declining based on performances over the last few years. I think it's more than reasonable to cap Brahimaj at 60% here, which is why I think he's a pretty good bet. But not the kind of bet that you'd fucking be super confident in, or fucking sell your fucking camel, your last camel, to fucking bet on Brahimaj. You wouldn't, right? You wouldn't fucking sell your kids dinner. You know what I mean? You wouldn't, you wouldn't get too confident over this, because his fight IQ is really bad. And it's a real shame that I can't just do these quick breakdowns and give you the analysis, and I have to say stuff like that. But it's clearly so many retards watching this video that don't understand that you just can't win every bet, and you can't control what fighters go out and do. If they have a clear and obvious path to victory, like Lopez last week, didn't shoot a takedown, and he, doesn't take that clear and obvious path to victory, I'm so sorry. I will apologise to you on his behalf. It's not my fucking problem. So let's take a little bit of footage now of Neil Magny's grappling. And so you can kind of see the issues with him on the ground. And as they say, you are only as good as your last fight. So we will take a look at his last fight against Allsopp. And so obviously Allsopp's a very good MMA grappler. We've just seen him completely dominate Joel Alvarez on the ground. And obviously, you know, Magny's a lot older, a worse grappler than Alvarez. We want to be seeing the limitations of Magny's ground game, right? So typically speaking, Magny's takedown defense is also really bad. He's one of these guys that, because he's quite weak in the lower body, he's like long and lean and lanky and tall, he does have a tendency to give up really cheap takedowns if you get in on his legs. And typically speaking, when you put Magny on his back, he is very, very weak on his back. And so he's been like this his entire career. And so with him being 39 years old now, you know, if his takedown offense and ground game is still this bad at 39 years old, you'd think there's very little chance of him improving, right? So this fight between Magny and Brahimaj, it really, really does come down to, does Brahimaj want to win? Because he's a good enough grappler to do to Magny what Allsopp has done. So Allsopp's got him down, about 3 minutes 10 left to go in the round. If we just flick through, we know Magny's very, very weak off his back. So no surprise that Allsopp gets the quick submission. Magny's just dreadful on the ground. But we won't stop there. We'll watch a little bit more footage on Mr. Magny. But obviously we want to watch fights where there's grappling. So the next fight we will take a look at is... So next we'll watch a Jake Matthews versus Neil Magny fight, which doesn't have much grappling in the first round. If we skip all the way through, it's mainly a stand-up fight. And this is why Magny is still able to pick up wins from time to time. It's because guys choose to stand and strike with him, right? And Brahimaj may choose to stand and strike with him. But when they take him to the ground is when you see him run into a lot of problems. Now, he actually takes Jake Matthews down here with about a minute left to go in round one. But if we skip through just a few moments to here, you can see that Matthews is able to use that guillotine to reverse Magny onto his back, which again is just another example of Magny being absolutely dreadful on the ground. And what's interesting about the ending of this first round is that there was a lot of controversy that the fight should actually have been stopped. You can see, you know, here Matthews committing hard to the guillotine, and it looked like Magny tapped and the ref stepped in to stop it, but then he protests and the ref's like, oh no, I made a mistake, just carry on fighting. Like, they think the fight's over at this point, but it wasn't. And then it continued into round two. Anyway, more grappling in round two, a lot more for us to take a look at. So here you can see Magny shoots a takedown. Again, Jake starts to attack the head. Magny goes to his knees, gives up his back, and then for the entire remainder of round two, you can see Jake's only got one hook in on the left side here, but generally speaking, if you obtain a dominant position on Magny, like you get his back or you get top position, he's very, very easy to control. So if we then skip through, you can see pretty much for the whole of round two, Matthews just completely dominates him from top position. And I mean, it's not like Matthews is a particularly good grappler, but with how weak Magny is off his back, Matthews just totally has his way with him from top position, completely and utterly dominates. And then in true Neil Magny fashion, he might do this again this weekend, but he puts pressure on Jake in the third round, puts him in a bad position, winds up getting a submission after basically Neil Magny and him weaponizing his cardio, causing Magny to break. Now if we look at Magny's record, if we go to his full record here, so most of his fights over the last few years that we haven't shown yet have been, for the most part, stand-up fights. You can see from the individual stats here that you know, the fight against Elizu Zaleski dos Santos was a stand-up fight. We've just watched his last two against Amosov and Jake Matthews. The Carlos Prates fight, pretty much a stand-up fight. It was over in 5 minutes. The Michael Morales fight, again, over in 5 minutes. So the last time that we see a decent amount of grappling from Magny was in the Mike Mallet fight, outside the Amosov and Jake Matthews ones. Oh, and by the way, if you do like this research tool, if you join the website diaryofaprogambler.com, it's all free and gain access to all this, and you can see the individual granular stats per individual fights, which helps you do, you know, really quick research to gain an overall, you know, understanding of how a fight went and give you like a quick visual overview. And it's also on the summary version of the page here. So yeah, if you like what you see, come on down, diaryofaprogambler.com. Alright, so where were we? Yes, the Mike Mallet fight. That is right, we need to show you the Mike Mallet fight. So again, Magny doing Magny things in this one. Got dominated for the most part in the first 2 rounds, and then pulled a rabbit out of his hat, weaponized his cardio, and took Mallet out of there when Mallet got tired in the third. Although Brahimai's cardio is not bad, to be fair. So if we just keep skipping through, we just keep going. So not any real wrestling in round 1. Then into round 2, keeping going, and we can go here. Okay, so you can see Mallet shoots a takedown, and Magny just basically falls over with about 3 minutes 30 left to go in round 2. We just skip through. Mallet kind of lets Magny up, which is a very strange decision, especially when Mallet had cardio issues and he's facing a cardio machine like Magny. He exerts all that energy to get the takedown only to let him back up, which doesn't make any sense. But there you go. We already said earlier in the video that being an MMA fighter is not particularly smart as a life choice, and so shouldn't really be surprised when fighters don't fight smart. So Magny looks for the outside trip there. Mallet's like, nah brev, I'm going to outside trip you. Gets Magny down about the midway point in the round. Again, what you'll notice about all the footage I've shown you so far, Magny does have a tendency to give up very cheap takedowns. So the rest of the round, Mallet just completely handles him from top position. Total domination. Again, Magny looking very bad on the ground. And if we go into round 3, same sort of story really, until it wasn't, where Mallet is like, well, I've had so much success on the ground, I'm just going to put you back there with another outside trip. And you can see Magny again goes down very easily in a bad position early in this round, mounted by Mallet. And again, going back to what we said earlier in this breakdown, Magny's very weak in the lower body with those skinny legs, which is why if you get in on his legs with trip takedowns, double legs, single legs, you can get him down very, very easily. Again, Magny takes it, Mallet takes him down there. Very, very nice. Took him down. Completely dominates him from top position, but then Magny gets back up. Mallet basically jumps on a guillotine to defend the takedown instead of just trying to defend the takedown, and melts. Magny via melt. So that was cool. So yeah, basically Brahimai, for all you guys who love studying MMA records out there, Brahimai's not a bad grappler, to be fair. Not a bad grappler at all. And we need to investigate why we're getting multiple of the same fighters thing appearing on their record. That's very strange. But yeah, Brahimai isn't the worst grappler in the world. He's younger, you know, good MMA grappler, good control, you know, striking's not bad. Magny's old, he's bad on the ground. Brahimai's got a base in grappling. Brahimai comes out and grapples hard here. He should get the job done. In terms of the fight spread, we don't have that yet. In terms of the over-under, very likely this one goes to a decision, in my opinion. But obviously with how aggressive Magny is at getting the finish, especially when he falls behind in fights, how bad Brahimai's fight IQ is, and also how old Magny is, there are ways this can end inside the distance. So I wouldn't take any of those bets. My lean is the over, to be fair. It's slight dog odds, but not like super duper 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 confidently. So I would probably give that one a miss and just stick to Brahimai money line. So let me know what you think. Hopefully he shows up fight smart. It's a big opportunity for him, a big name. Hopefully he can get the job done for us. So when we've just broken down this fight between Neil Magny and Ramiz Brahimaj, we talked about how Brahimaj had the advantage because he was in his prime and he was facing an older declining fighter in Neil Magny. Now, I'm also going to be recommending a bet on Tresean Gore this week, but even though a big chunk of the reasoning behind betting Gore is the same as the reasoning for betting Brahimaj, to the naked eye it's not so obvious because both these guys are around about the same age. Gore's 32, Vicente Luque's 34, but you know what they say, age is just a number. And the way that I look at fighters that are older, declining, is I always use the example of like cars, right? So if you had a 10-year-old car that had only done 1,000 miles and a brand new car that had done 200,000 miles, the 10-year-old car would probably be more reliable than the 1-year-old car because there was less miles on the clock, right? Less wear and tear, less stress on the components. It's all about how much work that particular car has done, how much it's been through in its life, right? And when you look at both Tresean Gore and Vicente Luque, even though they're about the same age, they've had very different careers, right? And Luque has been through a hell of a lot more. I mean, you can see it in their fight records. Tresean Gore's only had 11 pro fights, whereas Vicente Luque has had close to 40. And so Luque, even though he's only 2 years older than Gore, he's got a lot more miles on the clock. And on top of that, Luque was a fighter who relied a lot on his chin and toughness and durability in fights. He wasn't like a wrestler who would look to take guys down and beat them up on the ground where he could be relatively safe. Luque is a guy that used to try and drag guys into wars and wouldn't take a backward step and was happy to stand and bang and exchange with people. And sometimes he would knock his opponents out and sometimes he would get knocked out. But in most of Luque's fights, whatever happened, he would end up taking a lot of damage. And this finally caught up with him a few years ago in the Jeff Neal fight when he suffered a traumatic brain injury. He actually suffered a minor brain bleed, a minor brain hemorrhage. And even though there were signs before that Jeff Neal fight that Luque was starting to decline, he's really never been the same since. Since that traumatic brain injury, he's fighting a lot safer and smarter and more strategically. He's not as reckless as he used to be. But that recklessness, that pressure, that aggression that he used to fight with is kind of what made Luque Luque. And so without that, he's nowhere near as effective as he used to be. He also built a career off being incredibly tough, incredibly durable, and having an amazing chin. But again, since that injury, he's nowhere near as durable as he used to be. And so, even though from a technical point of view, Luque is a better striker than Tresean Gore, Tresean Gore proved in his last fight against Azamat Bekhoev that he's tough as nails, he can take a beating, he's very durable, he's very aggressive, and he's also pretty technical himself. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Gore's dealing with some traumatic brain injuries after the amount of damage he took in that Bekhoev fight and also the Marco Tulio fight. But the point here being, with Gore, even though their ages are roughly the same, you've got a young, hungry, up-and-coming bull. He's just moved his entire life to go train at the MMA Lab, which I think is a brilliant gym for Tresean Gore because MMA Lab produce tough, well-rounded fighters with great cardio, decent everywhere, and Gore already ticks all those boxes. So I think John Crouch is really going to enable Gore to start to reach his full potential now, whereas Vicente Luque, he is declining from fight to fight. And so this is one of those matchups where, from a technical point of view, Luque is, better on the feet than Gore. He's a more technical striker. In terms of grappling, I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground because Gore's takedown defense is amazing. Luque's takedown defense isn't. When you match these two up when it comes to grappling, I would probably say Tresean Gore's the better MMA grappler in terms of wrestling, but Luque's deadly with his submissions. His choking game is absolutely evil. So kind of well balanced on the ground. But if Gore got on top of Luque, he'd likely be able to hold him down pretty easily. So yeah, in terms of how these two match up on the feet, Luque, the more technical striker, but Gore younger, faster, you know, more durable. And I think Luque's reflexes are starting to go a bit as well, whereas Gore is pretty sharp. So this is another one of those fights where you just let the odds do the work for you, right? Two guys in the even money odds range. And as you guys know, I love the bet fights in the even money odds range. That's why we're taking Brahimai to beat Magny. Gore's at odds of around 1.81, which is minus 123 for an implied probability of 53%. Again, I think all things considered, it's more than reasonable to cap Gore at 60% here, because I think this is likely going to be a stand-up fight, and I think he's dangerous enough to stand a good chance of knocking Luque out in 3 rounds with a stage in Luque's career that he's currently in. And so, yeah, I think this is going to be one of those matchups where Gore, you know, younger, hungrier, more durable. Is it a super confident bet? Absolutely not, because Luque is more technical than him on the feet. But I think at this stage in their careers, you can trust Gore to show up and fight hard for 15 minutes without any issue, a lot more than you can Luque, and that's why I think it's fair to cap him at 60%. Now, we don't have the fight spreads for this one, unfortunately, but in my opinion, this matchup is more than likely going to end under 2.5 rounds. I think most likely outcome here is Gore by knockout, because I don't think Luque is anywhere near as durable as he used to be. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe this is a 15-minute chess match where they both, two technical strikers that chip away at each other on the feet. So in terms of showing you guys footage so you can understand the reasoning for this bet, it's kind of pointless, because ultimately, you know, we acknowledge Luque is the more technical striker out of the two, and this is one of those matchups where we're kind of betting Gore for the X factors like the toughness, the durability, the youth, the fact that Luque has actually quit under weird circumstances in some fights, like the Joaquin Buckley fight was a very weird one where he just basically rolled over, played dead, decided he didn't want to be in there anymore. So yeah, Gore's my lean on this one, that's why I'll bet him, but not a super confident bet by any stretch of the imagination. And we might have just won a bet on football, so we have to take a video of that for all the homies who might not be watching the game. Sorry about this, just 1 second. Before I started recording this video, I placed a bet on football, and then I was like, I'll do some videos because it wasn't really much else football running, and it was a winner while we did this video, which is very nice, which is why you can now see there's 5 people, 5 messages in the chat room. It's now 6, where people are talking about the bets. We will also now do the honors. The very, I still, when I do this on mobile, we've got a little bit of haptic feedback, but if we scroll down to the bottom and we grade this winner, there we go, let's grade this winner. Lost a few bets in a row last night, so it'll be nice to get back in the win column. There we go, we grade this winner back up to the top, back above 90 units profit lifetime. Very, very nice. And now we need to try and grind back up to where we were before last night. Sorry to get off track, but it's fun. We won some money. And for context, right, in cold hard cash terms, guys, I just won more if I lost every single pre-fight bet this weekend on this card. So we've given out 2 bets so far. Tresean, Gore, Rami's Brahimaj. I'm going to recommend a bet on Eric McConico now. We've also got a bet on Mackenzie, Dern. If I lost every single one of those bets, I would still be in profit overall from that one bet that I won on GKS Katowice on the UEFA Conference League that we just graded. I bet way more on football, so like, I don't know how much more I need to communicate this to you in these videos. I'm a professional gambler that specializes in live betting on the UFC, live betting on football. Those are my specialities, and if you want to feel the true power of what I do, you must come to our community, engross yourself in what we do, and start making money betting on sports as well, because live betting the UFC, live betting on football in particular, it's a hell of a lot more lucrative than fighting over scraps on these pre-fight bets, because ultimately none of us have a crystal ball, right? We don't know how McConico is going to go out and perform on Saturday night. We've got no idea, right? We don't know if Brahimaj is going to grapple. We don't know if Luque is going to show up and perform like he did 10 years ago and look absolutely incredible and smoke Gore over the 3 rounds. We have no idea. With live betting, we have so much more information to work with. That's why we make a profit almost every month of the year. That's why our win rate is so much higher. Our profitability is so much higher than these pre-fight bets. So it should be of no surprise to you when all the stats for how I perform on everything I do are on the website. You shouldn't be surprised when I tell you I lean much more into things that I perform well in. It's an absolute no-brainer. So get on the fucking train, because I won't be here forever. So why is Eric McConico a decent bet in this fight? Well, again, we're letting the odds do the work for us on every matchup, and the odds make a bet here an absolute no-brainer. An absolute no-brainer. You can see Donte Johnson, odds of 1.40, minus 250 for an implied probability of 68%. And the odds on Eric McConico, 2.95 plus 195 for an implied probability of 32%. In my opinion, McConico is better than Donte Johnson in every single aspect of MMA. The odds make absolutely no sense here. I think a lot of wiki capping is going into the odds. I think people see Donte Johnson 8-0 and they see Eric McConico 11-4 with some losses over the last few years, and they just assume that, you know, Johnson is a lot better than him. But that's not the truth, and I'm going to show you why. So we're going to start off by taking a look at Donte Johnson's last fight against Mr. Cody Brundage. And obviously we all know that Brundage is not the best. So if Donte Johnson did deserve this price tag of 1.4 minus 250, surely he would have totally dominated and totally destroyed Mr. Cody Brundage, but that was not the case at all. And Brundage came in on short notice too, very short notice, much shorter notice than Mr. Johnson. As you can see, just about scraped past Cody Brundage via split decision. I actually think this wasn't the best decision. I did score this fight for Brundage, so losing a decision to Brundage, even, you know, involved in a razor close fight against Brundage, it ain't a good sign. And I know there will be those of you saying, well, hang on a minute, Eric McConico was involved in a really close fight against Brundage as well, which went to the split decision. How can you be harsh on Johnson for going to a split decision with someone as low level as Brundage and not mention that McConico also went to a split decision against him? And how I would respond to that is, McConico's not a 1.40 70% implied probability favourite. Again, it's one of the reasons why we are letting the odds do the work for us, right? If you've got 2 guys here, neither of them are particularly good, neither of them were able to be dominant over Brundage, both of them struggled very, very bad against Brundage, wouldn't you prefer to have your money on the guy where if you bet $1,000 you win $1,950 profit, or the guy where if you bet $1,000 you only win $400 profit? And furthermore, the version of Brundage that McConico fought was a lot better than the version that Johnson fought. Brundage came in on like a week's notice against Johnson, had a full camp I believe against McConico, although you might want to fact check me on that. I don't care enough to go and actually look into that, because from my perspective, even if, you know, Brundage came in on short notice in both fights, or McConico came in on short notice, whatever, doesn't change the fact that both these guys are pretty low level. They both struggled against a low level guy in Brundage, and as a result, I'd much prefer to have money on the big underdog. But now we need to show you a little bit of footage of why Donte Johnson should not be an implied probability favourite of 70% in this. So there's 3 weaknesses that I've noticed about Brundage in his fights so far. You've just seen one of them there. His takedown offence and ground game's very bad. We see him kind of lunge at Brundage there, then give up a cheap takedown. So if we just scroll through, now McConico's not really a wrestler, he prefers to stand and strike, so I don't think it's a huge issue that Johnson's terrible on the ground. But you can see here he's been taken down literally 5 seconds into round 1, and if we skip through, see he's been on the ground for a minute at this point, and he just gets dominated for about 3 minutes till he pops back up to his feet. And from there, in fact, we will show a bit of striking from Brundage here. What you also notice on the feet is the second weakness in Johnson, and we're going to talk about the 3 weaknesses as we progress through this breakdown. The second weakness in Johnson is that his striking defense is very, very bad. So look at how often Brundage lands clean and hard on him here, and I can assure you McConico, it's a clean right hand there, I can assure you McConico is a far more skilled striker than Brundage, way more technical. One of the issues for Brundage in this fight was that even though he was landing clean on Johnson, he couldn't really hurt him because he got tired so early into the fight. There was just no pop in his shots. But there you can see he eats another left hand. There he eats a clean right hand. Johnson's striking defense is just not good. Eats a jab there. And we're only going to show, I don't want this breakdown video to be super long, so I'm only going to show you this little sequence towards the end of round 1. It's a good sequence to show you though, because in the first round, both guys are reasonably fresh compared to the second and third rounds. So here you're getting a true picture of what Johnson's striking defense is actually like before he becomes very tired later in the fight, where naturally he's sloppier on the feet and worse defensively. So as we keep going, you can see Johnson just doesn't read Brundage particularly well at all. Keeps eating clean hard shots. And then let's go into round 2, shall we? Anyway, as you can see, Johnson's ground game is very bad, striking defense very bad. From a technical point of view, I think McConico is better everywhere. So as we progress through the fight, I want to show you weakness number 3. I mean, you can see a bit more of his ground game here. Brundage drives in on the takedown, gets his back. About 3 minutes left to go in the round. Goes for an armbar, all that shit, gives up position. But as we get into round 3, you start to see the next issue with Johnson, in that his cardio isn't great. He does slow down as fights progress. So what we'll do, he's just had a minute to recover in between rounds. He's going to be relatively fresh at the beginning of round 3. So what we'll do, we'll watch him from here. We'll just for a minute or two so you can see how sloppy he is in this third round. So again, striking defense issues. You know, here Brundage misses the right hand, look. Watch. Misses that right hand. He threw it and he missed it. If we go back again. See how he misses that right hand? However, Johnson just didn't see it coming. When you see a fighter miss that badly, it's often because they anticipate a fighter like moving to the left or right to try and slip it or move back. The fact that Brundage just stood still is the reason why Brundage missed so bad, because he wasn't expecting him to just plant his feet and not move. So there you go. But he eats a follow-up jab now, stiff jab to snap his head back. And you see it's another stiff jab there. So Johnson on the feet, just very sloppy, very bad defensively. And as the fight progresses, even though he's still bouncing around, he eats another jab there. As he bounces around, you can see as the fight's progressed into the third round, he's become sloppier and sloppier. So he doesn't gas in the sense of like looking physically tired and physically exhausted, but he gasses in the sense of just becoming sloppier. And you can see like he's way easier to hit now in this third round than he was in round 1. Now a part of that could be, you know, that he feels he might be down 2 rounds and he's chasing the fight a little bit. Another part of it might be, you know, he's felt Brundage's shots and he doesn't respect his power, so he's kind of walking him down, not too worried about the jab. But at the same time, he just isn't reading Brundage at all and not moving his head. So for me, you know, again, he eats a stiff jab there, like, you know, stiff jab here, right? He keeps getting his head snapped back and made the miss. So again here, you know, even Brundage exhausted keeps catching him. So yeah, I just think Johnson's not very good. And so I'm not saying the McConico is good either, but let the odds do the work for you. Do I feel confident on Brahimite? No. Do I feel confident on Tresean Gore? No. Do I feel confident in Eric McConico? No. So letting the odds do the work for me. More than reasonable to bet Brahimite and Gore against the older declining shot Magny and Luque, in my opinion. I can cap Gore at 60-40. No problem. I'll take the younger guys, the fresher guys, the more durable guys in those fights. And with this one, McConico, you know, he is a lot older than Johnson, but he's a lot younger in his career. We were talking about miles on the clock in the case of Vicente Luque. McConico doesn't have many miles on the clock. He's also improving from fight to fight. He's just picked up a decision against Rodolfo Vieira, which is a big win. He's got a bit of a reach advantage as well, which always hurts. A decent height advantage. He will be the bigger man in there. He's a more technical striker. Almost certainly the better grappler. Johnson is aggressive and he hits hard, but there ain't a lot else there, to be honest with you. Not a lot of substance. So I like Mr. McConico at underdog odds. Now, do we have the over-unders for this fight? We have the over-unders, sorry. Do we have the fight spreads? Are we getting to the point of fight spread yet? No, a couple more fights without them. Okay, so I personally think this fight's more likely to go over, just because both are very tough, both are well-rounded. I don't think Johnson's that dangerous. He's aggressive, but I don't think he's like crazy dangerous or anything like that. He's a little bit sloppy. I think this one's more than likely going to go to a decision. In terms of the fight spread, we don't have it, but McConico is a fighter that I might hit the fight spread on later on in the week, and I don't want to make this breakdown super long, but if you obviously need verification that McConico is the more technical striker than Johnson, go jump on Fight Pass or Paramount Plus or wherever they use in your country to show past fights, and go watch a bit of footage on McConico. But if I do that, it'll double the length of the breakdown for this fight, and yeah, I don't really want to do that, so go check it out yourself. I think the footage on Johnson illustrates he's a very low level striker, and I think that should be enough for you to make your mind up on whether or not there is value on Mr. McConico, which I believe there is. Now we're going to be breaking down a really interesting fight between Jalin Turner and Kauê Fernandes, and Fernandes is a very, very tempting bet for me this week. I haven't pulled the trigger on him yet, and I don't know if I'm going to, but if we scroll down and look at the odds movement chart, we can see in the past few days Fernandez's odds starting to decline a bit. So he was 2.40 a couple days ago, which plus 140, and he's declined down to 2.32. Feel like a lot of people might be sensing that the odds should be closer here than having Turner this big of a favourite. It is a tricky one. It is a tricky one. It's a tricky one because we haven't seen very much of Fernandes against the level of striker that Turner is at. Turner's a very high level, very, very technical striker, but he does have a couple of big weaknesses. In fact, potentially 3 big weaknesses in his skill set that Fernandes may be able to exploit. So we'll talk about them. We'll focus mainly on them, because what I will say is I do think Turner, at an implied probability of 60%, odds of 1.61 minus 164, given how many weaknesses he has, I think he is a terrible bet at these odds. So for me personally, if you do want to bet this fight, it's Fernandes or pass. It really is as simple as that. 2.32 plus 132, implied probability of 41%. For me, kind of flirting with this fight being 50-50, which again wouldn't make Fernandes like a super confident, super safe bet, but it would be a 9% margin over the bookie, which is very generous. So if we talk about each of Turner's weaknesses, and then we can talk about why Fernandes may be able to exploit each of those weaknesses, and then we can kind of summarize at the end of that. So the first weakness in Jalin Turner is his biggest weakness, which is his ground game. So guys that are abnormally long and tall for the division obviously have advantages in that they're very long and rangy, and you can see here, Turner's got a 4-inch reach advantage, a 6-inch leg reach advantage, and he's a lot taller than Kauê Fernandes. So all those individual reach advantages and height advantage, it adds up, right? It means Turner can land clean, hard shots on Fernandes from a range where Fernandes can't counter unless he comes forward, covers distance, gets inside, and puts himself at danger of being countered. So there are big benefits to having a big size advantage over your opponent. There's no doubt about that. But every body type in MMA has downsides. And every once in a while you get a unicorn like a John Jones with Jalin Turner's body type, long, lean, tall, rangy, that doesn't have any of the downsides, but most of the time they do. And we've spoken about some of them already, breaking down these fights this weekend with Neil Magny, because Magny is abnormally long and tall, and as a result his takedown offense is very bad because he's weak in the lower body. And Turner has exactly the same issue. Turner is one of these guys that if you take him down and put him on his back, he just has no idea how to get back up to his feet at all. You could hold him down easily. Now, this is one of those fights where even though Turner is awful on the ground, I don't know if it's going to be an issue because Fernandes is predominantly a striker. Like, Fernandes doesn't grapple much. If you take a look at his 4 fights in the UFC so far, and we look at the granular stats here, he shot 2 takedowns on Guram Kutateladze, and he got both of them. And then he shot 1 takedown on Mark Diakaze, which he got. But in his 4 fights in the UFC so far, he only shot 3 takedowns. And again, if you do like this research tool, you can gain free access to it by joining my website, diaryofaprogambler.com. Link in the description below. And you can, if you want to get like a quick overview, if you wonder, like, you know, if you remember watching the Kutateladze fight, but you don't want to go and spend 15 minutes watching it again, and you're like, you know, how often does Fernandes grapple? You can come look at the granular stats and get a quick overview. And then over on the other side, if we look at Jalin Turner, you know, his takedown offense is 75%, which looks good on paper. But what you'll notice about Turner is that when guys come in with a grappling heavy game plan against him, he struggles very bad. And so this is one of those matchups where if Fernandes were to grapple, he would probably be able to get Turner down easily and lay on top of him for like entire rounds, because Turner does nothing if you put him on his back. But Fernandes, he's a tough Brazilian, he's a scrappy Brazilian, he's predominantly a striker, he's got a base in Muay Thai, he's going to want to stand and bang. But, you know, one of the reasons why I said Turner is a terrible bet in this odds range is because you don't want to be betting a guy at moderate favourite odds who has no ground game at all against the guy that can actually grapple if he wants to. He doesn't grapple very often, but if he did on Saturday, Turner would probably be screwed. So that's the first weakness in Turner and the first reason why I like Fernandes in this fight. The second reason that I like Fernandes is because, building on what we said about Turner's body type and being long and lean and skinny and weak in the lower body, because he's weak in the lower body and he's got skinny legs, he's going to be very susceptible to leg kicks. And leg kicks and body kicks are Fernandes' best weapon. He got a stoppage with leg kicks in his last fight against Harry Hardwick. And this has been brewing because we've seen him absolutely hammer the legs of every opponent he's fought in the UFC so far. And his leg kicks are great and he lands with big impact and he does a lot of damage with them. Now, the question for me is whether he's going to be able to land a lot of leg kicks on Turner, because obviously the reach and leg reach that Turner has enables Turner to fight outside of a range where those leg kicks can land. So in order for Fernandes to land leg kicks, he's going to have to cover distance, get inside to a range where he can actually make contact with Turner, and when he does that, he's obviously going to be in danger of being countered. And we know Turner has good boxing, true legit knockout power, and Fernandes is a fighter that, you know, fights with his hands naturally low. But his leg kicks are amazing, and when you see a fighter with skinny legs, it doesn't take much to take their legs out with some, you know, hard, clean, impactful leg kicks, and Fernandes certainly has them. The third weakness in Jalin Turner is that he's chinny, and you know, this isn't a weakness that Neil Magny has, certainly not a weakness that John Jones has, but a lot of fighters like Jalin Turner that have, you know, long, lean, lanky frames for whatever reason, they have a phenomenon that we call within my community affectionately giraffe neck, where fighters have just got these long ass necks that are abnormally long and tall, and they're usually very chinny. It usually doesn't take much to knock them out. We've talked about this recently when breaking down some Sam Patterson fights. He has the same issue. Best example I can think of for this is Stefan Struve. Remember Stefan Struve? They actually called him the skyscraper, and he'd be very chinny. He's abnormally long and tall, slow, and used to get, knocked out, rocked, wobbled, dropped a lot. Another good example is James Vick. Fighters with Jalin Turner's body type often have bad chins, and Turner has been knocked out a bunch of times, rocked, wobbled, dropped, whatever. Now, to be fair, just like I'm not sure whether the wrestling is going to be an issue for Turner because Fernandes doesn't grapple that much, I'm not too concerned about Turner's chin either, because we've already said Fernandes, even though he's predominantly a striker, he's a kicks-based striker. His leg kicks and his body kicks are his biggest weapons. He's not the best boxer, and he does fight with his hands kind of low. He's got a very kicks-heavy style of striking. So it's not like Fernandes has really dangerous boxing and like big knockout power in his hands. And even though he's a great kicker, with him only being 5'9" and Turner being 6'3", it's going to be almost impossible for Fernandes to kick Turner in the head. He's just not going to be able to get his his shin up that high to be able to land. And so there's not too much of a risk there for Turner when it comes to his chin. But it only takes one clean hard shot from Fernandes to land, and he can put Turner in trouble, and that can happen to anyone, right? So there's lots of reasons to like Fernandes in this fight, but there are some big risk factors as well, which is the reason why I don't love his odds. The first reason we've touched on, even though there are disadvantages to Turner's size and body type, there's also advantages in that he's going to be able to chip away at Fernandes on the feet from a distance where Fernandes isn't just going to be able to counter from where he is. He's going to have to come forward, and that puts him at risk of eating counters. On top of that, he does have a tendency to slow down as fights wear on. He slowed against Mark Diakaze, slowed against Guram Kutateladze as well, whereas Turner has great cardio. So, I do think these odds of 2.32 plus 132, they can be in kind of like that trappy range where, because he's an underdog and there's lots of ways he can beat Turner, you're naturally going to be drawn to him. But we can't understate the fact that there's also big issues with Fernandes as well. Like, he's probably going to lose the third round, with how bad his cardio is. So unless he gets an early finish or wins the first 2 rounds clear beyond all reasonable doubt, which won't be easy, it's going to be tough for Fernandes to win. So this is one of those fights where I do lean towards Fernandes, but more so because of the odds. Like I always say, you gotta let the odds do the work for you. If both these guys were at the same odds, I would take Turner. So this is one of those fights where I think Turner's more likely to win, but you get a better deal in the odds on Fernandes. There's more upside in his odds. So at the moment, I'm passing on this one, but I might change my mind, and I might actually end up betting Fernandes. I don't know. If you're not part of our community, Diary of a Pro Gambler, join, and you'll obviously get notified in your notifications and by push alert or Telegram, wherever else you choose, to receive your notifications, maybe even email. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much it for that fight. So in terms of the I haven't got the betting site up. I must have closed it down. I was going to say fight spreads and stuff. Where are we? In terms of the fight spreads, and the over-under. Let's whip this back over. So, still don't have fight spreads. Okay, so over-under 1.5. I do think the fight's more likely to go over 1.5 rounds, but I don't love the odds enough to take it because, like I say, Turner is dangerous, true legit knockout power, fights with it, and Fernandes fights with his hands down low, and Turner's chinny. So as much as I do think both are skilled technical strikers where the fight is likely to go deeper, and therefore I lean towards over 1.5 rounds, they're also both dangerous enough where either of them could quite easily get a finish at any time. And so, yeah, it's a tricky one. Very, very tricky. Oh my god, PSG almost just scored against Villa, which would have probably won us another bet, although there's a long time to go in the game. PSG putting it on here. We'll just watch this little bit one more. Oh, there we go. We have one. Ha ha ha. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Sorry, boys. Gotta record another video for the boys. If you are not in the football betting group, what are you doing with your life? We're over here fucking multitasking, where we're fucking recording breakdown videos and making money betting on football at the same time. Literally reevaluate your life choices, boys, if you're not in my football betting group. Like, seriously, what are you doing? You get paid to watch sports. Membership pays for itself. Literally no downside. I'm amazing at this. One of the best in the world, and I won't be around forever. So join us while you still can and make as much money out of me while you still can. Now let's break down a super interesting matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Joel Alvarez. Now, before I researched this fight, I thought it was going to be an easy matchup for Joel Alvarez, but after researching it, I think it could be way closer than the odds suggest. Still think Alvarez will likely win, but based on Njokuani's last performance against Carlos Leal, has a legit chance of making this an absolute war on the feet that could be razor close. So, Alvarez a 1.35 minus 286 favourite for an implied probability of 71%. Chidi 3.25 underdog, which is plus 225 for an implied probability of 29%. And we can see, even though there's not a massive age gap between these two, it's only 4 years, Chidi is at that stage in his career where you would expect him to decline a lot from fight to fight. He's also had a lot of fights as well, a lot of miles on the clock, 36 pro fights, and I think quite an extensive Muay Thai kickboxing career as well. So what's interesting about these two is that they're both abnormally long and tall for the division, so they both usually have a big size and reach advantage over their opponents. But this will be one of those, or one of the very few times in their careers where they don't have that much of a size or reach advantage. You can see that they're both absolutely huge and they're both big boys, right? Chidi is a bit longer and taller, but nothing major. Now, they both share the same weakness in that they're both very bad on the ground. And I know some of you will be rushing to tell me that Alvarez isn't bad on the ground. He's got all these submissions, blah, blah, blah. In the context of MMA grappling, he's bad because he's a guy that gives up cheap takedowns and, like a lot of abnormally long and tall fighters, lays on the ground doing absolutely nothing to get back up to his feet. Yes, every once in a while he catches someone in a Hail Mary submission off his back, but for the most part, he's a terrible MMA grappler. Now, on the ground, they're both awful. But I don't think it's going to matter because neither guy ever really tries to take their opponents down. If you look at the stats from their last few fights, no takedown attempts there from Alvarez. Oh god, I didn't mean to click that. That was a mistake. Where we are, we're back here. Okay, so no takedown attempts, or one takedown against Luque in 15 minutes, none against Drakkar Close. One attempt failed against Elvis Brenner, and one takedown attempt failed against Jackazy. Chidi is just a pure striker that never tries to take anyone down. So this is likely to be a stand-up fight. If it stays on the feet, Njokuani is the better kicker, Alvarez is the better boxer. And in that type of dynamic, I'll always favour the boxer, simply because it's easier to punch someone in the face than it is to kick him in the head. So while Chidi's kicking game is amazing, he's got devastating leg kicks, bone-crunching body kicks, and his boxing's not bad, Alvarez's boxing is just a level above him, and even though Chidi's kicks will hurt Alvarez, I think Alvarez's boxing is a much bigger problem for Chidi. And one of the main reasons why I always favour the striker in this kind of dynamic, on top of it being easier to punch someone in the face than it is to kick him in the head. But in order to get kicks off, you need time and space. And when you're pressured and forced to back up and circle away from your opponent to find space to get your kicks off, it's very difficult to get them off clean in a safe way without being at risk of being off balance and eating big counter punches, because someone like Alvarez that is a high-pressure, aggressive fighter will walk Njokuani around the octagon, put him on the back foot, and it will be very difficult for Njokuani to find the time and space to get those kicks off. So it's one of those matchups where stylistically it does favour Alvarez, which is one of the reasons why he's the favourite. But because they're both very high-level, skilled strikers, I think the fight will be competitive. I don't see Njokuani just getting destroyed here, and personally, in order to justify the price tag on Alvarez, you'd want to be very confident he'd be very dominant to the point where the fight couldn't possibly be close enough where the judges would fuck it up, and I definitely don't feel that's the case here. So, for me personally, this is dog or pass. I wouldn't bet Njokuani myself, but the odds on Alvarez are terrible, and I wouldn't be taking Alvarez in this odds range in a fight that could actually end up being competitive. So if we take a look at the fight spreads, over unders, all that kind of good stuff, over 1.5 rounds is interesting to me actually. Over 1.5 rounds very interesting to me, because Njokuani showed his toughness and durability in his last fight against Carlos Leal, which was an absolute war, and Alvarez failed to knock Vicente Luque out in a stand-up fight, which again, you know, we know Luque is absolutely shot. So we will go for that bet. We will go in on the over 1.5 rounds. We'll pop that bet in right now. We've got 4 bets so far. Is one of them not showing at the top? Yeah, they're all showing. Okay, so we'll pop that in right now. Over and this one, pick the fight. We will go there, over 1.5 rounds, and then we'll go odds. We're 1.66, 3 units. Bibbidi doop. But not all units are created equal, and like I said, I bet a hell of a lot more on football than I do pre-fight bets on the UFC. That is dropped in there as well. We just make sure everything is good. It's good. Yes, we'll go for that. Very nice, very awesome, and very cool. Hopefully we can make a little bit of money on that one. Now we are going to be breaking down the fight between Mansur Abdul-Malik and Dustin Stoltzfus. So another big favourite on this card. Abdul-Malik, huge favourite. Average odds of about minus 667 for an implied probability of 82%. So in order to get any real value on Malik, you've got to give him like an 85% or chance or better chance of winning, which is very, very difficult to do in a cage fight to the death, especially when you're as inexperienced as Abdul-Malik. And so even though he's very, very likely to win this, because he's significantly better than Stoltzfus on the feet, he has better cardio, you know, because he's so strong and physically imposing and athletic, it'll be very difficult for Stoltzfus to get him down. But you never know. Stoltzfus is a dog. He's tough as nails. Yes, he's bad defensively on the feet. Yes, he doesn't have much power in his hands. Yes, he gives up position a lot on the floor. And yes, he does slow down a lot as fights wear on. But at the same time, you never know. In a cage fight to the death, if Abdul-Malik has an off night, gets injured, has a bad weight cut, anything like that, decides to fight sick, which sometimes fighters do, you know, maybe Stoltzfus can make him pay for it. But another bit of a dead fight for betting this one. Obviously, cannot touch Abdul-Malik at very, very steep favourite odds. But on the flip side, I wouldn't want to be putting my money on Stoltzfus either, because he needs Abdul-Malik to significantly underperform or make a mistake in order to win this. And even if Abdul-Malik were to make some mistakes, I still don't feel all that confident Stoltzfus would be able to make him pay for it. And so, you know, if you do want to bet this fight, obviously take Stoltzfus, dog or pass, but not the most interesting matchup. In terms of the fight spreads, wouldn't touch either of them. In terms of the over-under, wouldn't take either of them either, because I could see Abdul-Malik adding Stoltzfus to his highlight reel with another quick and early knockout. So this is a quick one. This not the most interesting fight. We'll move on to the next one. So this fight is potentially going to be the easiest fight of Mackenzie Dern's career. And in an environment in the UFC these days where you get so many big favourites on so many matchups, like I was talking to Pep Sylvia on X this week, where we were talking about how difficult it is on pre-fight betting this year to make money, because any fighter that has a reasonably good chance of winning is like a 1.5 or minus 250 favourite, and it's just very difficult to find value on pre-fight bets. And so in an environment where any old fighter that doesn't really have very many advantages over their opponent is now a huge favourite, you know, Donte Johnson being a great example over McConico this weekend, he's awful. I'm very surprised not to see Mackenzie Dern in a similar odds range to where we see, you know, fighters like Alvarez and Makhachev this weekend. This is one of those matchups where, unless something crazy happens, like Mackenzie Dern fighting sick or injured or having a terrible weight cut or just getting caught in a bad position out of nowhere, I just don't see how she loses. If both these girls show up and perform to their full potential, I barely give Robertson a chance, because quite literally Mackenzie Dern is better than Robertson in every single aspect of MMA. There is nothing that Robertson does better than Dern. Like, Dern is literally better everywhere. And so where usually when we have bets like this, I would like to show you like video footage to kind of justify the bet, it's very difficult with this one because it's kind of common sense. And in order to like convey to you how many advantages Dern has in this fight, I'd have to show you like over an hour of footage where we show like 30 minutes of footage on Dern, 30 minutes of footage on Robertson, and that's not realistic. What I would do is advise you to go and do your own research on this one, because ultimately there's no such thing as a safe bet in sports betting. Anything can happen. Sports are chaotic and unpredictable, and you know, athletes do magical things when you least expect it, right? It's why we are here, it's why we love sports. But what I would say is Mackenzie Dern is as close to a safe bet as you will get in sports, and Robertson is going to need a miracle here. She's going to need Dern to have an off night, because if Dern shows up and performs to her full potential, Robertson has no chance. So Dern is, I believe, my biggest pre-fight bet of the year. I'm actually betting the kind of money on Dern that I bet on football, which, like I said, I only bet a fraction on my pre-fight bets of what I bet on my football bets. My football bets are the serious business. Pre-fight bets don't really take it too seriously. I just keep pre-fight betting small. My edges are UFC live betting, football live betting. But this is one of those really rare situations where you find a fighter which really has no realistic way of losing at actually playable odds. I do get her implied probabilities like close to 70%. It's a steep price to pay, but like I say, I would have expected her to be a much bigger favourite, especially in this UFC betting environment where anyone that has a lot of advantages over their opponent these days is like minus 1,000. It's getting silly. The game has changed, and so Dern's a very rare opportunity in the current betting climate for the UFC. So what we'll just do, we'll go through, you know, each of the advantages Dern has, and then you can go do your own research to verify the kind of stuff that I'm saying. So first off, let's start with like physical attributes. You can see they're roughly the same age and roughly the same size, but before we get into like the technique, we're going to talk about how they just match up physically. So first of all, Mackenzie Dern is a cardio machine. We've seen her involved in 5-round wars. She just doesn't ever get tired. She just has that genetic, never-ending gas tank where I don't think I've even ever seen her breathing heavy. Even when she had her nose destroyed, her nose crushed, it took tons of damage in that first Jandiroba fight, she still came out and pushed a crazy pace in that 3rd round. So Dern is an absolute cardio machine. Now Robertson has been known to slow down in fights, particularly when you make her work hard for her takedowns or work hard to maintain position. So if you watch a lot of Gillian Robertson's fights that have gone deep, like her last one against Amanda Lemos, she won't look like she has bad cardio because she's in total control. She's able to get easy takedowns and dominate her opponent on the ground without exerting too much energy. But if you go watch some of Robertson's earlier fights where opponents have made her work harder for takedowns, she does fade. Now, on one hand, it's possible that her cardio has improved a lot, but I suspect since her grappling has got better and now she doesn't have to work as hard for takedowns or as hard to control her opponents on the ground, I think she's burning less energy, and that's why her gas tank is holding it better. Against Dern, she's going to have to work extremely hard on the ground. She'll get takedowns easily because Dern doesn't even try to stuff takedowns. Dern's happy to go to the ground and mix it up with you. But Dern has such fast, aggressive jiu-jitsu that Robertson is going to be forced to work very, very hard to beat Dern in the scramble, and that'll be exhausting for her. And she'll also burn through a lot of adrenaline with how fast Dern likes to play on the ground. So Dern, advantage number 1, cardio. Second advantage, and again we're going earlier back in Robertson's career now, we use the example of Dern in her first fight against Jandiroba where she took tons of damage and pushed through and kept going hard in that third round. Her title fight against Jandiroba, her last fight, was an absolute war where she was put in some bad positions and she had to keep digging deep to get the win. She took a lot of damage in the Amanda Lemos fight, knocked down multiple times, looked like she'd been in a car crash, face all busted up. She kept pushing, she hung in there, she kept going. She has got the heart of a lion. She's got that warrior spirit. She's the type of fighter that you have to practically kill in order to finish. And the same thing can't be said for Gillian Robertson. Again, earlier in Robertson's career, when she's struggled to get takedowns, struggled to have success on the ground, she has started to cave mentally, and we've seen her quit a couple times. So Dern's better cardio, she's tougher, she's got that better fight IQ, that better mentality. The X factors favour Dern in this one, pretty majorly. And so if we then move on to the technique between these two, obviously they're both primarily grapplers, so the fight will likely feature a lot of grappling and be decided on the ground. We'll get into that in a moment. But if we just focus on the striking, this is probably the first time in Dern's career where she'll have an advantage over her opponent when it comes to striking, and I think that's huge. When Dern first came to the UFC, her striking was awful, and don't get me wrong, it still isn't great now, but Dern was, sloppy, bad defensively, no power in her hands, didn't move her head, couldn't read her opponent. But since she started working with Jason Perillo, her footwork's better, her movement's better, her striking defense is better. Now she actually hits hard and can damage you. Whereas Robertson, bad case of pillow fists, no power in her hands at all. And I think Dern will probably actually dominate this fight on the feet. And we've never been able to say that in a Mackenzie Dern fight before. So she's going to be able to land bigger shots, do more damage on the feet, build confidence by having the advantage on the feet and being more successful on the feet. And I think every moment this fight is standing, Dern will have the edge. But we know both these girls are grapplers, and they will want to get this fight to the ground. We said a few moments ago, Dern won't even try and stuff Robertson's takedowns. It'll be probably the easiest fight of Robertson's career to get her opponent to the ground. Because whenever we've seen anyone shooting on Dern, she's happy to flop to her back. Because she's so deadly in the scramble. She's so good at hitting reversals, getting your back, attacking with submissions. She's happy to fight off her back. And she is one of the she might be the only fighter in the history of the UFC where pulling guard actually works. I don't think I've ever seen any fighter have as much success pulling guard and giving up takedowns as Dern. She's a nightmare off her back. So where you see Robertson against other opponents hit those takedowns and just sit in their half guard, chip it away at them with ground and pound, good luck on Saturday night, because it ain't no picnic on the ground with Dern, even when you're in top position. And so when it comes to grappling, Robertson will get takedowns, but Dern will eat her alive on the ground. There are levels to the game, and Robertson is still a Padawan. Mackenzie Dern is the Jedi. There are levels and levels and levels and levels and levels and levels to the ground game, and Dern is operating in a whole new dimension, she's in some other part of the multiverse Robertson doesn't even know exists. Dern is completely different breed on the ground. So this is a matchup where Dern has basically every advantage you could want in an MMA fight. And outside of the crazy, random, wild shit we see in sports going down, Dern should win this a very high percentage of the time, and actually a higher percentage of the time than her odds suggest, even though she's a pretty big favourite. And so she is my biggest pre-fight bet of the year. I am actually betting serious money on her. I don't usually bet much on pre-fight bets. I'm all about football live betting, UFC live betting. But Dern is far too good of an opportunity to pass up this weekend. Even at steep favourite odds, it's a price worth paying, and I would be truly amazed if she loses. Like I say, humans are imperfect. They often fight sick, injured, fight after bad weight cuts. They feel pressured into taking fights when they're not 100%. You know, I think that's Robertson's only chance. Dern, there has to be something up with Dern for her to lose on Saturday night. And so, if we take a look at the over-under, I do actually think this fight is quite likely to end under 4.5 rounds. I would be surprised if Robertson can survive on the ground for 5 rounds with Dern. That would be a bit of a shocker. Might go for the under 4.5. I'm not going to make a decision now on this video, but something to think about for sure. But anyway, yeah, I think Dern is the safest UFC bet I've seen in 2026. You don't get safe bets in sports betting, but Dern's as close to it as you're ever going to see. So hopefully she comes through for us. Now we're going to be breaking down the main event between Islam Makhachev and Ian Garry. So I think this is going to be one of those fights where it either ends up being super competitive, like Makhachev's fights against Volkanovski were, or it's going to end up looking a lot like Chimaev versus Duplessis, where Makhachev just keeps getting Garry down easily and absolutely melts him. I think that's the most likely outcome, to be honest with you, but it can't be ignored that Makhachev had a huge size advantage over Volkanovski. Volkanovski is also in his late 30s, and yet every time he fought Volk, he struggled to hold him down and slowed down as the fight progressed. And obviously Garry's cardio is amazing, and he's a lot bigger and a lot younger than Volkanovski. So if we're using Volkanovski as like a barometer, Garry is live as hell here. But I personally think Makhachev is the greatest MMA grappler in the history of the sport, and he ain't going to be easy for Garry to deal with. That is for damn sure. So in terms of how these two match up stylistically, Garry is the more technical striker on the feet, but Makhachev, I wouldn't say Makhachev is massively inferior to Garry when it comes to striking, and I'd actually say Makhachev is likely to land the harder, more damaging shots. Garry has very neat and tidy striking, good footwork, good movement. He's excellent defensively. He's got a great jab. He's very technical. Whereas Makhachev hits harder. He's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more explosive. And so I actually think it's very close when it comes to striking. If Garry had a huge advantage on the feet, I would be more open to taking him as an underdog. But I actually think Makhachev can win rounds on the feet against Garry, especially because it will be difficult for Garry to fully focus on his striking, because every time Makhachev comes forward and attacks him, he's going to have to kind of have one eye on the takedown and assume the takedown attempt is coming. So that will disrupt Garry's striking, make it difficult for him to settle into a rhythm, and make it difficult for him to find his range. So the threat of Makhachev's grappling actually closes the striking skill gap between these two. And so I actually think Makhachev can potentially win a stand-up fight here, which not a lot of people would expect. But he's also a southpaw, and we know the awkward lefty stance, especially for a wrestler, can give a traditional striker like Garry a problem, because when he comes forward, he won't know if a fucking right hook's coming, a left hook, left head kick, or a fucking takedown. He'll have no idea. And it'll be difficult for Garry to deal with. So, in terms of grappling, Garry's takedown offense has looked average at best, in my opinion. Now, we haven't seen many guys really commit hard to taking him down. And we're going to go through the stats to take a look at this. So if we look at Garry's fights, you could see that Belal Muhammad tried to take him down 7 times. Didn't get any of the takedowns, which looks good on paper. But not all takedown attempts are created equal. And Muhammad didn't actually try that hard to get him down. They were kind of half-assed takedown attempts. Rakhmonov only attempted 2 takedowns in a 25-minute fight. I think Rakhmonov was injured in this fight. But he did get him down easily once. Notably, it says there's only 2.5 minutes of control time. But Rakhmonov did take him down in the second half of the round. Which means when he got Garry down, kind of kept Garry down for the remainder of the round. Michael Page took him down. Michael Page didn't take him down. Garry took Michael Page down. So no takedowns from Page. No takedowns from Jeff Neal. Magny's an awful offensive wrestler. So, stuffing 2 takedowns against Magny doesn't mean very much. Rodriguez didn't take him down. Neither did Keenan Song. Gabe Green didn't try to take him down either. So you can see, the only real information we've got on Garry's takedown defense is the Rakhmonov fight and failed takedown attempts from Belal Muhammad that he didn't really commit to very hard, so I don't really consider them as takedown attempts anyway. So the only evidence we've got for Garry's takedown defense would be the Rakhmonov fight, and I've got to be honest with you, Garry didn't instill much confidence on the ground in the Rakhmonov fight for me. Obviously it was only 1 takedown, 2.5 minutes, but he looked quite weak off his back. Got taken down pretty easily. And he hasn't really got much experience facing guys that will commit very hard to taking him down. Now he's facing, what I consider to be the greatest MMA grappler ever. And so I do heavily lean Makhachev in this fight. I know a lot of people are dog hunting on Garry this weekend. He ain't the one for me, man. In order for Garry to win, he's going to have to hope Makhachev tires out big time. And I wouldn't feel so sure that would happen before Makhachev may already be up huge. Because I have a feeling Volk's takedown offense, even though he's a lot smaller than Garry, I think Volk is likely a lot harder to take down and hold down than Garry, because he has that small, compact frame. And now this fight's at welterweight, Makhachev may not slow down, because he won't have to cut as much weight. Might slow down more, because he's carrying more body weight, but I think this is potentially another Duplessis versus Chimaev fight, where Makhachev shows there's levels to the game. That's my gut feel on this one. I think Makhachev dominates. But at this odds range, he's unplayable, especially with how bad he looked in those Volk fights. I wouldn't be touching him in this odds range. But I do think Garry is likely to get wet blanketed for 5 rounds, and I do think Makhachev is very likely to dominate. So I wouldn't touch Garry either. In terms of fight spreads, nothing there for me, not that interesting. And in terms of the over-under, my lean would be the over 4.5 rounds, but I wouldn't bet it because the odds are too tight for me. So I hope you found those breakdowns useful. If you did, come join us, diaryofaprogambler.com. You do not have to be a professional gambler to bet like one. We make money almost every month of the year on both UFC live betting and football live betting. So stop wasting your time looking for side hustles and jobs and fucking, watching these breakdown videos and reading articles online and trying to figure out how you can make money betting on sports, when you can just take all that stress away, pay a guy like me to do it for you. The success rate on people who actually make money betting on sports is so low. It is estimated that only 5% of betting accounts ever opened turn a profit. Rather than trying to fight hard and spend a decade learning how to do this and trying to be one of the minority, the 5% that actually make money betting on sports, take all that stress away, pay a guy like me to do it for you, and the membership will pay for itself. Link in the description below. Don't be a dum-dum, boys. Come join the team. You'll absolutely love it. Have a great weekend. Hope you make some extra cash, and I will hopefully see you on the website in the chat room this weekend, celebrating these wins with us. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.